So to kick things off, I've included some assets in our actual project that will be in the start folder if you downloaded those. And we'll need both the finished product that I created beforehand, before I recorded this screencast, as well as the assets and palettes that I exported from that. So included in this is also fonts. One we'll be using called Nexa Free Light and Nexa Free Bold, which are at this link here, fontspring.com/fonts. And then you'll find Nexa, and there's 2 free fonts available that we can use. If you like the whole library, feel free to download it. I made use of just the free stuff for now with you guys in mind, so you don't have to break the bank. So with this in mind, we can go ahead and create our first document and get these assets and everything set up. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll go to Designer. We have our existing design that I created before already open. I'm going to make a new document. And we'll want to create an artboard and set the width to not be device, but web, the type. And then I'm going to go for 1440 by 900, but I'm going to adjust the height to be the same as the width, just to have that already done for us. And make sure you check create artboard. And then we'll hit OK. Great. So that's our initial document. I'm going to start by calling this design system. And chances are, if you haven't already imported this assets, you won't see it here. So to actually do that, I can do it again. Import assets on that drop down, find the personal blog one in the start folder, and then just hit open. And it should import that. I probably imported it twice, so I'm gonna delete the second one. I don't need that. And I'll go back to that personal blog, and now we have all those assets available to us. Before you do all of this, make sure you install that font, because a lot of the files here depend on that font, or those fonts in particular. So I'm gonna save this file down, call it personal blog end. So we have our initial setup here. Our logo is just a 4-leaf clover for now. I didn't go above and beyond and create custom branding here. I figured you would follow along, maybe use your own branding, or just kind of get the concept. If you were building your own blog, you'd be using your own branding anyway. So keep that in mind as we go. But initially, the whole point of a design system is to establish a look and feel for components that get repeated often before you go into a high fidelity design. So in the professional world of design, this saves a ton of time if you're working with a team or a group of people that need to see something before the final piece. Because if you end up spending so much time creating, like, say 3 high fidelity designs and then pitching those to your client, you end up risking wasting a ton of time and heartache, especially if they don't like any of the approaches. So a design system is kind of a way to at least give them something, but not necessarily show them a final piece so they don't gravitate towards one idea over the other. But it does allow quick fashion design for the sake of the end user and your client as well. So the idea is just to make these things scalable and more efficient in the long run. So just start basically putting things on canvas here. So we want to actually create just a collection of things that we think will get repeated. So a logo typically will have a black and white fashion, and then also a color version if there is a color. Some logos don't require a color because they're just black and white. But in our case, I'm going to have one that's our deep blue color. We don't have our color palette imported yet for this document, so I'll actually do that now. So I'm going to add a document palette. And I'm going to go to our actual source, or I need to import one, excuse me. So let me delete that one. I need to import palette, and then I'm going to import it as a document palette. And this will be in the personal blog start folder again. It'll have that suffix AF palette. So great. So now we have all those colors ready to go. And I'll cue in the blue here for our main background color. We actually don't need it in this case, but we could show it as the logo in white on the blue, which will end up being how it looks in the final design. Move these down. I have Textiles too. So this document, our first document, had a bunch of custom ones. And right now you can't actually export a text style like you could an asset in Affinity Designer. I'm hoping that feature comes where it works the same way, because it's kind of contradictory otherwise. But there is a workaround that I found out, that when you go to the final file, make sure you save it down, and you can import styles from another file. So if you guys are following along, definitely do that. So import, go to that import option, and then choose the original file I shared with you of our final piece. And then from that, you'll get all of these styles of which you can import. So I'm going to just check all. Oops, we already had that. And then you can rename them as you come in. It's up to you how you want to handle that. If there's any conflicts, it should show you. So by default, I'm just going to hit OK on all of them, and they should all be in our document now, which is awesome. So that saves a ton of time if you're working with multiple documents with different text styles. Okay, so from here we can finally get our spec font ready, is what I like to call it. So I'm going to type branding, and this is just for organizational purposes. It's not going to be part of the app or design we're going to use, but notice there's a spec style that I like to use here, and this is just kind of a base font set in Arial. You should have that on your machine already, and from that we can just group these liked items. So in this case, this is our branding. So I'm going to toggle back to assets and bring out our traditional logo there, and just use our smart guides to move things around. Okay, so with our branding ready, we can start to move in typography mode. So we have base styles already set here. So I'm just going to type heading 1. And because this is, I previously used this style, this one's adapting to that. I actually want to detach from the spec style here. From that, I have no style selected, as you can see. And then I want to actually select the heading 1. So we have that applied to this one. So that's how that works. If it's already got a style on it, you need to detach it from the text style itself and then apply a new one. In this case, we have a heading 2 that I'll be using as well. I'll just update this text to be that. Heading 2 is just mainly the same style, just a different size. So I'm gonna shift nudge this down, and I'll select this one to be this size and continue down to H3. So in the web design world, there is a 6 scale of headings. So there's 1 through 6, and this is where I'm getting those naming conventions. It's part of the HTML language if you're not familiar. It's nothing you really need to know, but it's important if you decide you want to code your own blog in the end. Okay, so there's our heading 3. And our heading 4 style will be slightly different. It's going to be all caps. It's commonly referred to as small caps. And it's just a different style that we'll use just to kind of be show a more elegant introductory of paragraph content or something like that in a blog post. So I'll just move these around. I actually want to add another spec title and call it typography. We'll need an actual paragraph copy as well. So you could see here I've used basic Times New Roman, which I believe should be on either system if you're on a Mac or PC. I'll actually hit the T key twice to get the cursor to look like this, and that resembles a text frame. So I actually want to drag out a frame of text, of which we don't have yet, but we can add. Going to text, insert filler text, and this should give you a ton of text to work with. You could just expand and contract however far you need text. In our case, it's I only want just a bit because our text is going to be pretty large on the screen. But from that text, I want to apply another style, which is going to be our main body copy style. And you'll see how bigger it gets. And that's just to show context there. So within that content, I always like to have some bold text too. Because this is filler text, you can't actually highlight any of the text, which is kind of a downer in my workflow. So instead of actually using that filler text, after all, I'm going to use a app I like to use on my Mac called Little Ipsum. And you could just go online and find any other Ipsum tool and use it wherever you please. This one just is on my Mac, so I can just access it where I want and just grab some Ipsum and go to town. So with this text, though, I can actually highlight it now, and that's the whole point of using it. Otherwise, I'd use the filler text. I want to actually just bold these, so I'm going to hit Command B, And then on this one, I'll hit Command I to italicize it. So we have our basic text body content ready to go there. I'll actually probably delete some of this. We don't need that much. And I'll save that down. Next, we probably want a block quote. That's typically a nice thing to have on a blog if you interview other people or just get responses from others. That's kind of a great way to go about showcasing it in a different format. So I'm going to actually copy our quote here from our original source. It's from Dr. Seuss himself. So I like that. And we'll use the same text tool. It's going to be the text frame tool. Probably decrease the width a bit there. And that's going to have our block quote style, as you can see up here. And I'll probably just go ahead and do the same for our citation. So this is going to have its own text style too. You see here, I made that one as well. So the idea is using those text styles in this design system. Anytime you have a design where you want to adapt a new form of content or a new design, you have those available to you, so you don't have to create them from scratch each and every time. Okay, so next we have a few elements that are related to forms and images. Imagery, I'm just gonna keep this over. You can feel free to use your own image here just for an avatar. This is gonna represent the user in this case. And the way I made these is I imported an actual image and then masked it to a circle. So if you go and create a circle like so, hold shift while dragging that, and then you can just bring in an image and drop it right below that layer, and you should have the same result. I kept mine at 64 pixels width and height, and then 32, just to show different context there. So the next one we're gonna have is forms. And I wanna use our spec style here. We can align these. So with a form, we can use a field that's going to be basically a rectangle, but we're going to make it pretty long and wide, maybe about 48 pixels high. Probably move this over a little bit. And obviously blue isn't the ideal color for that, but we do have a style and assets all ready to go for the forms. We could pull one out and just use it as is if you're following along. Maybe I'll create one from scratch though, just to show you how I did it. So I want to have just slight border radiuses on these, maybe 3 pixels. And the fill is going to be white. We'll use the default white here. And I want to add a stroke to this rounded rectangle. So I'll go to the, you can either apply an outline in the effects panel or just apply a stroke directly. Right now there's no stroke, so you can set one by adding a width. And it's going to be set to black by default, and that's just way too dark for what we need. So I'm going to set it maybe like, I'll use the hex sliders. Great, so there's close to what we need. On top of that, it might be nice to have a little inner shadow. And you can go to the effects panel and add that accordingly. And I'll make the angle 270, increase the radius some. So something like that, just a slight incaved look. If you're interested in doing that, it looks like the fields I ended up with don't have that feature, but the end result I think is something simple and refined, so I like this. So we'll make use of our assets for now, and then I'm actually going to make this document a little bit wider. We need a little more room. So with any form field, typically there's different states involved. And by states, I mean when you enter your cursor and start typing, or when you exit the actual form field, things trigger, things change and happen in such ways. So this design for that field is what it would look like if the user cursed into it and maybe started typing. So that's kind of the concept there. The outline there just turns to our primary blue color. So with forms, that's essentially it. There's going to be a use case to have a text area that's larger, but that's in a nutshell all we need. And up next, we'll actually add our buttons, which will be our general call to actions on things around the site. So I'm going to add a new category to our spec, and maybe move this up a bit. And then since our buttons are already defined, I can just use those as is, but like I did with the form fields, maybe I'll show you how I created these. And the neat thing about these is they are utilizing constraints, and you notice the text stays centered when I stretch it, which is exactly what I want. So here's how you do that. You go and create a brand new button that's about, how tall are these? We'll say 50, yeah. And we'll use our black for now. And then I want to add a radius to these that is an absolute radius and is 3 pixels. Just subtle, something subtle. I don't want to stroke on these, so I'm going to turn that off. And by default, there's no constraints, but we do need text. So I'm going to just set primary and we'll go back to our text style and use the button text style. And while I'm at it, to make a text style, you'll want to just basically type text the way you want it to appear on your screen, and then coming down to this panel and clicking the new character style here. So if it's a single character style, you'll click this button. If it's a paragraph text style using the text frame tool, you'll use that button. And then you can make a group text style as well, which is pretty neat. Of that, you can just go and create tests. I'll create a new style, name it whatever you want, and just hit OK, and you'll see it pop up over here. So I'm gonna actually delete that because I don't need it, but I wanted to show you so you know how to do that. Back to our button. I'll align this vertically and center it and horizontally. So we'll do this. And at this stage, it's not grouped, but I do want it to be a group. And you could just call this whatever button you prefer. I'll just say button for short, BTN. And with constraints, here's how this works. You'll want to get inside the group and access the primary button text layer. What I like to do is deselect these arrows and leave the other rectangle alone. So you'll leave it as is. And by doing that, you can make that stay central to your scaling. And you can do the same for this view too. See how it stays in the middle? That's pretty nifty when it comes to UI design. So that's how these work, and ultimately how you create them. And then if you want to add an asset, you just drag that button into the asset library, and there it is, ready to roll. So you can drag out however many you need. Pretty cool. I'm gonna undo all of those. So back to our buttons. So that's basically all those have the same functionality. They just have different looks and feel. Up next is our icons. And these I kind of just sourced. You feel free to use them at will. They're nothing out of the ordinary, but we might use them throughout the design, and you can just make use of them if you want to. So I'll just go ahead and set the stage, put those on this document. All right, so putting them on the canvas obviously make them very unorthodox and in different positions. So I want to align these the best I can. So we'll just use our alignment tools again, and we'll do vertically align the middle, and then horizontally we'll align horizontally. So that way they're evenly spaced and just look way more consistent on this document. Next is just some card ideas that I came up with. So the idea is that it will be a call to action that's got a little more pop to it, so you can see it, opposed to just being like a general text-based driven call to action. So with these, we'll basically make a box with some content in it that's just going to be a call to action in itself. So I'll start with just a gray background on a card, and you could feel free to experiment here. I don't know that I ended up using these in the end, but I felt like I needed to kind of convey a new concept to show off a different idea. So I'm actually going to duplicate this square, and we're going to make it our blue color. And I'll save this down. I do know I want categories on my blog, so with that there is a text style for categories, and I'll just start typing one, maybe inspiration as one of those. And it's already got a few styles attached to it that I don't want, so I'm going to detach this from that and then add a category text. And then we could just place this, say, in the top left corner. We just need some placeholder content, so I'm going to use the same expression here: brief history, the World Cup logo. And that's using our heading 3 style. So as I pasted it, already made sense and used the way we wanted. One quick thing to note though is if I try to shrink this down, it's going to skew, and that's because this isn't a text frame, it's a text, artistic text. So I'm going to actually cut that out by Command X and then come back in with the text frame and paste it back in there. So now, because of the square concept, we can just fluctuate this text at will. And then we'll add one more text area that is going to be using the text frame tool. We'll add some just basic body copy. I'm going to go back and get my Ipsum again, maybe a sentence or two. Paste that in. And this isn't how we want the body copy to look. So I'll go back here. There's a body copy and then a body copy small that I'm going to use. The small makes more sense in this case because it's a smaller concept. And I might delete some text here just for now. So that's centered. That's kind of the look and feel I want. One thing you could do to make this scale a little better possibly is use the constraints tool again. Everything here could be grouped essentially. Within that, we can access each thing and do different constraints on those. So I'm going to actually not scale this, but I do want it to affix to the top and left for the inspiration text. And then this I do want to scale. And we can even just, make it affixed to the top as well. And the same is true for this. We can leave it alone in terms of scaling. Maybe not the vertical scaling. Same with this one, no vertical. So essentially, after those sets of configurations, we can just scale this to the left and right and things stay the same. In fact, these should probably stay top and left justified too. So we'll do that. There we go. So it's not perfect, but you get the idea of how responsiveness that can be, which is something we should pay attention to. So with that done, I want to add the same concept over on the blue one, but with different styles, of course. So I'm gonna copy those over. Looks like they pasted up in the top left. That's okay, we'll bring them down. We have the textiles set to black by default, but you can always modify those. So these are gonna be white in this case, but I'm gonna actually make the category our orange color in our palette. There's a lighter orange and a darker orange. I'll probably go with the lighter. And we could do the same constraints group. Cool, so that's essentially our design system. It's a very brief design system. It could be way more in depth. In fact, where I work during the day, we make design systems that cover almost all the bases for the sake of there's one source of truth. We follow that, and then everything on our application or our platform is consistent through and through. This is our initial setup. It might be a little boring at first, but this gets us rolling and lets us go make use of these styles elsewhere. So this video in particular is pretty concise compared to how much time it took to actually make the styles, decide on the typography, decide on the colors, the branding, the buttons, all of those things. I did that off camera just for your sake, but if you're doing this yourself, take time here to make time to make sure you like the direction. Maybe do multiple design systems before you dive into actual design. We will move on to the next video, which will be wireframing some ideas for this blog. And then from there, we'll actually move into design for the desktop views, and then finally resolve with the mobile views, the responsive views. So I'll see you in the next video.